I recently completed the build of a flamenco guitar with the Luthier Trevor Gore, and wanted to capture in this video a summary of my thoughts and of the experience. In short, it was a fantastic experience. I learnt a lot from it, and I highly recommend that any passionate musician understand their instrument better by going through a similar process. In this video, I have pulled together a series of photos and a couple of short videos which I took during the build process. They capture the main aspects of the build and some key stages, but they are by no means a complete documentation of the build. They're in approximate chronological order, although I've had to shuffle a couple of photos here and there because several work streams were done in parallel. And also be aware that the voiceover may not match the images on the screen at any one particular point. The build was completed at Trevor Gore's workshop in northern Sydney. Trevor is one of the world's leading luthiers and also a teacher of luthiery around the world. He spends probably half his time building guitars, the other half teaching the science behind building. Trevor's unique among the guitar building community because of his scientific approach. He has literally written the book on the way acoustic and classical guitars create their tone, and he's sought after as a teacher of luthiery skills. His unique point is his scientific approach. He's an engineer by training, and he applies true engineering skills to the art of luthiery, and that's evident in his book and also in the build process. It was embedded in every single stage of the build. Trevor has extraordinary luthiery skills. Watching him work is like watching a virtuoso musician play their instrument. He is thoroughly familiar with every aspect of it, and is, as I say, a virtuoso in the luthiery business. In terms of my background, I've been playing guitar for 40 plus years, but very much on and off. I played a lot in my teenage years and early 20s, but recently started playing again, and it's become a big part of my life in the last few years, probably after my children showed interest in music. This is the third guitar from Trevor. The first two were commissions directly from Trevor. I've gravitated towards Trevor as a luthier for my instruments because of his scientific approach, and by coincidence we also share a lot in common. We both did high-level competitive sailing in our younger years. We both have engineering degrees. We spent part of our career in consulting, although his consulting was more engineering and mine was more business, and have a passion for rugby. So we had a lot in common. In terms of my woodworking background to undertake this project, I am an engineer, as I say, and have a good handyman type of approach. I've done woodwork before in that in my teenage years I once built a boat, a sailing dinghy in the moth class. That was quite successful, but I had modest woodworking skills at the levels required for building a guitar, particularly some aspects such as planing. I hadn't done a lot of before, and there was a pretty big learning curve for me to climb up, but I was pretty handy and had some general woodworking skills. The design brief for this guitar was for it to be a sister guitar to my current main guitar, which is a classical guitar built by Trevor in 2015. That guitar was built out of Gidgee, an Australian timber, very dense, very heavy timber, and that guitar is very much a pure classical guitar. What I was looking for in this guitar is a more all-round guitar with a different voice to my classical. It is, in terms of its brief, a flamenco guitar, probably mostly blanca, but a little bit of negra in terms of its voicing, and very much wanted to use the best available timbers from Australia, best in terms of tone as well as aesthetics. I wanted this guitar to be spectacular and a good match for my classical Gidgee guitar. The timber for this guitar was sourced by a bloke named Pete Curley. Pete is a local legend in the Australian luthiery community. He fells the timber himself directly and has an ability to source both spectacular timber but also timber that produces fantastic tone in musical instruments. The body of the guitar is made from Tasmanian Blackwood. Tasmanian Blackwood comes in a very wide range of densities and colours. This particular Blackwood used is at one end of the spectrum in terms of its density is very low. It's about 550 kilograms per cubic metre and is a very light colour, and of course has a spectacular flame. For the degree of figure that it has, I think it was relatively easy to work. I thought it was going to be much harder, but it was actually okay using some of Trevor's tips and techniques. The fretboard of the guitar is made from gidgee. Gidgee is a outback Australian timber. It's extremely dense, one of the most dense timbers in the world. It's a classic desert timber. It was very difficult to plane. It blunted tools and was almost impossible to plane, but however, it sanded very well, and we were able to use a lot of the sanding techniques to use the gidgee. The neck was made from Australian cedar or Queensland cedar, sourced from tropical Queensland. This timber is very similar to the traditional cedars used by European luthiers. It was very lightweight but stable from a neck construction perspective. It was somewhat difficult to work in terms of it being flaky for me, I found. It chipped quite easily, but again, a refined technique helped overcome that. The binding of the guitar was made from jarrah, sourced from southwest WA. It's a suitable binding timber. It's very robust, has great figure for it. The only non-Australian timber used was the soundboard, which was Lutz spruce, sourced from Western Canada. It comes from a stash that Trevor sourced directly when he went to the workshop there. I'm not sure which workshop it was, and picked out some of the best spruce that was available. It's also nearly identical to the soundboard in my gidgee classical guitar. In fact, it may have come from the same tree. We don't know for sure, but it looks like it has, and it has very similar properties. Trevor stands out from other luthiers because of his scientific approach. He's been an engineer his entire career, and his work in understanding the acoustics of guitars, acoustic guitars, is really the culmination of all that work and effort that he has over decades in many different fields. I, through my engineering degree, chose acoustics as an elective subject, but I have to say that what Trevor's done pushes way beyond what an engineering degree actually taught in terms of the understanding of how a guitar creates the sound that it does. His scientific approach is embedded in every single step and stage of the guitar build process. I've included a couple of videos in this clip for the plate vibration mode analysis that he does, and as well as the harmonic analysis using the visual analyzer software. So you can see just a sample of some of the things that he does to understand the acoustics of the guitar. His entire process is mapped out very clearly. You can see that in his books. He has a range of different spreadsheets that he uses to calculate intonation settings that are precise and aligned to specific string sets, for example, and he uses jigs for nearly every step of the process to improve the accuracy of the output and improve consistency over time. Overall, the guitar build required 38 half-day sessions, plus there were a dozen or so hours of solo work by myself as well as by Trevor. So all up, well over 150 hours of build time to create the guitar. The way we worked was very closely. It was one-on-one. This wasn't a class. It was very close supervision by Trevor. Given some of my limited skills in, for example, planing, he was there to point out technique errors and fix any mistakes that I made, and there were plenty. And I think any guitar build will have mistakes. It's about how you approach the process to minimize mistakes, and also how you address and fix mistakes as you go along, and that's pretty standard. So it was very close supervision, much appreciated to do it in that manner. This was not a standard guitar that we were building. This was quite bespoke using complex timbers and using pretty clear and specific requirements. One of the things that was greatly appreciated from my perspective is that Trevor understood that I worked in a relatively demanding corporate job, and my availability was quite inconsistent. I couldn't say that I was going to be there every second Tuesday to work on this over that period of time, and we were quite flexible. My work is consulting work, and I have periods where I do have capacity, other periods where I have zero capacity for months on end as I'm working on a project. And Trevor was very flexible about that. He understood that, and that is much appreciated. The project took just over 2 years, mainly because of my availability, but also because it was interrupted by COVID in early 2020. There was a period of time there where we couldn't make any progress. But overall, yeah, over 150 hours to build the guitar, but on a flexible basis. Trevor's workshop was brilliantly set up. It had all the requirements, humidity control, all the tools that are needed. All those tools were precision set up and maintained by Trevor himself. It's located in a beautiful waterfront property in the northern part of Sydney, only about a half-hour drive from my house, a little bit less than that, and it was a great location to work from and included a small outdoor area that we could work at sometimes. It was a pleasure to work there. When you work one-on-one with someone for that amount of time, you get to know each other well, and it was good that Trevor and I had a lot in common, and I think we got on well. We spent a lot of time over a coffee break chatting about all things guitar, and it was many of those sessions where I learnt more than any other aspect of the build, asking general questions and thoughts about the engineering aspects of guitar playing. It was a great experience, and really good to spend time with Trevor in that regard, to pick his brain, so to speak. One of the things I've learnt through this guitar build experience is the extraordinary range of tasks and skills required to build a guitar. It's really quite wide, from raw timber refinement to the detailed work to finishing, to the scientific approach of measuring what this guitar is going to sound like. And there were some moments that were more natural for me than others. The things that were most satisfying for me were the carving of the neck. That was something that was quite a special moment, and something that I really enjoyed. And I think that was one of the things that I did with relative ease compared to some of the other tasks. Also, carving the bracing was a very satisfying part. The bracing is carbon fibre reinforced, and that was fairly natural for me, having done a lot of work on boats previously in fiberglass and Kevlar and carbon. Closing the box was a real milestone in the build, and a very satisfying one. That was the moment where you really started seeing it come together, and you could see kind of what the guitar was going to look like in the end, and we could start doing some of the testing for acoustic properties. I quite enjoyed doing the design of the rosette. That was something that was a bit of a surprise to me, how early in the process we needed to do that. It was one of the first jobs we did, but I quite enjoyed working on the aesthetics of that to make the guitar stand out, if you like. And the other thing that I think I've learnt through the entire process is to really generate a love and appreciation for the timber itself, and understand how the grain works, how the figuring works. That was something that I learnt a lot during this process. There were some aspects of the build that were not natural for me. Some of the very fine detailed work and the finishing of the guitar, those are not my strengths, I don't think. And I lent heavily on Trevor's skills to complete those parts. In terms of the end product, I'm absolutely delighted with the guitar. Very happy with its tone. It is truly a different voice to my gidgy classical, and has a much sharper percussive feel to it. You'll be able to hear recordings of this guitar elsewhere on my channel. I'm very happy with the feel of the guitar. It does truly feel like a sister to my classical, in that the neck profile is the same, the body shape's the same. The action is different, obviously, string spacing is the same, but overall it's a great sister guitar for that. I'm very happy with the aesthetic choices. It's clearly got some bling to it in terms of the timber used and the finishing, but it's also tips its hat to the traditional aesthetics of a flamenco guitar. It's very lightweight compared to my classical guitar, and it does feel fragile, but I think that's more because I'm accustomed to the heavy, gidgy-bodied guitar of my classical. There's nothing fragile about the actual construction itself. The guitar is also installed with a K&K pickup system, and again with Trevor's customization, redoing some of the wiring for best possible sound reproduction. And so some final thoughts about the entire experience. Overall, it was a fantastic life experience and journey, if you like. Not only did I end up with a beautiful guitar that sounds amazing and will be, a guitar that I have for the rest of my life, but the actual experience of going through the process, I think, was a really enjoyable process, and as a passionate amateur musician, I think I understand our instrument a lot better, and I highly recommend that anyone that's passionate about guitars or whatever their chosen musical instrument is, to get involved in the Luthier side to understand more about their instrument. It definitely won't be the last guitar I build. Will I become a luthier full-time? No, I won't be at this stage. I think I need to balance. Well, in my life, there's family comes first, then career, and third is my hobby for music, which is very important to me, but it's below those other two aspects of my life. And I wrestle with the limited time I have in terms of, should I be building another guitar or should I be playing and becoming a better musician? So at this stage, I'll be playing for a while, but yeah, as I said before, this won't be the last guitar I build. So overall, highly recommend that other musicians go through this process. You'll have a great time and learn a lot. And finally, thanks to Trevor for hosting me. I know he's quite a private man, and I appreciate the opportunity that he's given me to build a guitar with him. Thanks.